What's your current vision for the perfect dogfight experience in a space? And let's just jump right into a big one here.
This should take I mean, that's
20 seconds.
That's obviously a one-word answer, isn't it? Yeah. So, what I really want is I want to have the dogfighting work within the parameters of proper physics. I want to bring back the balance on the ships in terms of not overpowering the thrusters. And I sort of feel like everything's become a bit too much of a mismatch and everything's become a bit too overpowered. And so what I want to move towards is more distinct personalities on the ships. And I don't want ships to be so powerful that they can adjust their course as quickly as they currently do. And I also want to make sure that the sort of allocation of your power, whether you're sort of overpowering your thrusters has an effect on its sort of heat output, and also whether that thruster may misfire or not, or if you get your thrusters damaged, could also affect your ability to maneuver.
Yes. That's the second goal. The Dutch put on the field for a moment. It's Samba time at the Cotton Bowl.
Hello everyone, Osiris Frost here, and I gotta say that this one feels good. On this Friday past, a very special episode of Reverse the Verse aired, featuring Chris Roberts himself. Chris talked about several wide-ranging topics, but most importantly, he opened the interview with a 12-minute answer to a question about his ultimate vision for dogfighting in Star Citizen. I've linked the time-stamped video in the show notes in case you haven't seen it yet. In answering his question, he addressed several specific points about the various flight mechanics which have been some of the most divisive topics on Spectrum and Reddit since the beginning of the Star Citizen project. To explain why I'm happy about Chris's answer, I'll provide a little background on the topic. You may recall from an early episode of mine that I didn't have a flight sim background prior to backing Star Citizen. For that reason, I didn't have a horse in the race, so to speak. But what I've noticed from hanging around Spectrum and Reddit was that often there would be very detailed posts by very informed and opinionated backers as to how flight should work in Star Citizen. As development proceeded, the existing flight model continued to evolve, and so did the debate that ran alongside it. This debate essentially centers over the belief that flight in Star Citizen should be either based on Newtonian physics, or that it should instead utilize a high thrust in any direction type model. I'll attempt to simplify that for the sake of brevity. The latter approach is popular among a subset of the community which is into fast-paced, frenetic, almost FPS-style ship combat, in which you could make unrealistic high-G maneuvers to quickly change direction and outflank your opponents, keeping your weapons on target nearly 100% of the time. For lack of a better term, this is an arcade style of flight, which some find fun, but is certainly not anything approaching realistic. A very vocal minority of backers have loudly and publicly advocated for this type of flight model since the beginning, and have been heretofore successful in their campaigning. Just look at current flight mechanics in Star Citizen. Maneuvering thrusters have very high output relative to main thrusters, and ship combat is very circle-strafey. As a result, it is very common for people to use a dual flight stick configuration to control their ships in-game. I myself use dual sticks mostly because of how advantageous it is to do so with the current flight model. On the other side of the debate are those who want flight to be governed by natural physics, which is to say that a ship's movement must take into account the forces that are acting upon it, such as momentum, lift, drag, thrust, gravity, etc. In such a flight model, most plane-shaped ships would be fast in a straight line, but couldn't perform unrealistic maneuvers like they can currently. Turning would require pitching and rolling rather than yawing and strafing. This is how you see fighter pilots dogfight in real life. Under such a system, ships would perform slightly differently according to their aerodynamics and thruster configuration. The capability of maneuvering thrusters would be greatly diminished, and as a result, dual stick use would be disincentivized. Think about it. It wouldn't make much sense to have to hold a stick forward all the time when you could be operating other controls with that hand. Instead, you'd set your throttle and only adjust it as necessary, since 99% of the time when you're flying, you're accelerating in a forward direction. So where do I fall on this? Let me address that by way of a shout-out. As I began to grow increasingly interested in Star Citizen, I was lucky enough to have some time off from work, during which I watched a lot of content on YouTube. During that time, I came across Citizen Gamer's channel. Jarrus, the host of the channel, has been probably the most ardent supporter of a Newtonian physics flight model in the community, or at least the one with the highest profile given the soapbox his channel affords him. As a consequence, he's also taken an enormous amount of criticism for his advocacy of that type of flight model. However, he has absolutely convinced me that implementing such a system would be the best way forward for Star Citizen. I won't do him the injustice of trying to summarize his entire body of work in this video, but I will say that if you haven't seen his content, it's definitely worth your time, so I encourage you to head to his channel and give him a sub. I've linked it below. In the interest of full disclosure, I do occasionally lurk on his Discord. I find it enormously educational. However, he doesn't know me and he hasn't asked me to plug his content. I am doing that of my own accord as a way of paying back his help in educating me on the issue of flight mechanics. He posted a video a few months back outlining some of the major problems with the existing flight model. I linked to that as well because it's a great starting place to wrap your head around the subject if you don't fully understand the situation with the current flight model. I'm looking forward to hearing his thoughts on this recent RtV episode, and I'm sure he'll be putting out a video on it before too long. So anyway, this latest RtV seemed to indicate that Chris Roberts is taking on a more direct oversight of the flight model development. I'm sure there's a fascinating behind-the-scenes story that ties into the recent departure of John Pritchett, but I'm the furthest thing from a CIG insider, so I can only speculate as to what's going on internally. Suffice it to say that based on everything I've learned to date, I'm very happy with Chris's detailed answer to the question and what it means for the direction of flight going forward. He strongly hinted that he might have something to show off by CitizenCon. Speaking of which, he announced that 3.3's targeted release date is moving from Q3 to align with CitizenCon, and that in the future this will continue to be the plan. They're only 10 days apart, so it's not too big of a deal, and we can expect them to cram a little bit more content into the patch with the extra week and a half that they'll have. So that's all for today's show. I've been Osiris Frost. Thanks for watching. That's all for today's show. Thanks for watching. If you're new to Star Citizen, or you know someone who's thinking of playing, you or they can earn 5,000 UEC on your account by registering with my referral code, which you can find in the show notes down below. If you have any questions, feedback, or episode suggestions, go ahead and leave them in the comments. And if you haven't already, please be sure to like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate that. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.